Nigeria's new president, Bola Tinubu, is yet to knock on the door of agriculture, agro-Ireland, and the food chain since he took office on May the 29th. However, the agric and food sector professionals are looking to see what game-changing policies and actions will take place moving forward. Joining me live tonight to discuss this is Akin Alabi. He's the managing partner at Corporate Farmers Nigeria, and connected into the studios is the CEO and founder of FIGO on Oghenetega, Iortim. It's great having both of you on the program tonight, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Akin in the studio, thank you for coming. And Oghenetega, we appreciate your time as well. Akin, let me start with you. What do you make of the fuel subsidy removal and the flotation of the Naira? How will that impact your agric sector?
All right, so let me start like this. I did a simple market analysis yesterday, because I wasn't in town for a while. So I said, okay, let me just test it and let me see the impact on food. So I went to the market yesterday to buy a couple of home products like rice, beans, and all that. And to my greatest surprise, boasting it has affected the food systems. We can't take it away. The reason because a typical woman that sells food in mile 12 that will transport a commodity from point A to point Z will tell you that, boy, the cost of transport has tripled. So definitely it's going to affect, or it has affected, food supply system. So it is affecting it. No way about it. That's just the pointer. It is affecting it currently. So
that's inflation. Oghenetega, let me ask you, food inflation is currently at about 24.61%. Do you think we can ever moderate this figure? Keeps going up, away from even the headline inflation, as it were. Inflation is about 22.4%.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors affecting this, and I like to categorize them into two, which is the internal and the external factors. The internal factors, I would say, are your factors of production, and one of those key units is actually your capital, which refers to things like your transportation, which is affected by external factors such as, fuel. Before the fuel subsidy was removed, we have to remember that, inflation was also at an all-time high because of a lot of the government policies from the Buhari administration. But is there a way back? Yes, there's definitely a way back. I do think that, as the price of fuel hopefully comes down, we would see, a reduction in that. But we're also seeing a lot of businesses taking proactive measures to build the necessary infrastructure to also curb losses, which is also another key factor that also affects the price of food in the market.
Well, so let's talk a little bit more about transportation and storage, because I'm sure we could do a whole lot more, Aki, by the way, if we deal with these twin issues. What's your take on that? What should happen next?
So on transportation, we need to open up that space very well, because today, food systems, in terms of distribution, it's dependent 90% basically on road systems. So we need to harness other avenues of conveying our food. Air system, simple railway system, so that food can get to channels easily and for distribution process and quickly. So we don't depend holistically 100% on road.
Well, it's basically where petrol products come in.
Exactly.
Petrol, diesel.
So we need to split it and break it. So we need more players to come into the sector and invest a whole lot in food distribution system.
There is something that touch petrol and diesel.
It reacts to food. It reacts to food instantly.
Because they're tied together.
Exactly. And not because they're tied together, but because the mentality we have is that once the price of petrol shoots up, the local woman that sells food also believes that automatically I need to increase my produce.
Because she's going to get, let me just, Tega, what do you think? What's your thoughts on this? Because again, I've got to move my goods, by the way, and the Okena man, the whatever, is going to charge me more because the price at which he's buying petrol, the number of hours he's queuing the petrol station or the gas station has increased. So it's going to factor all of that into how much it's going to charge that woman, and she eventually charges Bolson.
Yeah. I mean, she's absolutely right. If we look at how food is produced in Nigeria, don't forget that, over 70% of the food that we eat are produced by the smallhold farmers. To get them into the mile 12 markets, there's a lot of aggregation process that happens at the last mile, right? Which means that a lot of motorcycles loaded with yams, a lot of smaller vehicles that depend on PMS, right? Before it even gets to the main trucks that move them from point A to point B. Like, Akin has said as well, road transportation is a big challenge because in states, you also have people charging you, fees to move products from one state to another state. So these are some of the things that are, exacerbating the issues that we already have around food crisis. But also, I think there's also the angle of storage. Storage is a very big element, which I think we also need to address in order for us to be able to curb, some of these shocks that affect, food pricing. So I think the woman in the market is absolutely right. It would trickle down. It would affects every single thing, basically. And food is no different.
So we need to talk about storage. Let me get back to Akin very quickly. Ask about how do we maximize what you see in the industry in terms of storage and transportation. We're talking about investment in infrastructure, whether you're going to have the kind of aircraft that can have some cold room kind of and move food from whatever, from Mambila Plateau to Abuja to Lagos, whatever, whether it's fresh fruits from Benue State, from Makodi, whatever, all the way down to Lagos to Port Harcourt to Kano from there, and tomato and other perishables. So why is it taking so much to do all of this in terms of, because if you invest in the logistics, they've got to invest also in the cold rooms at the destination point.
Okay, let me give you a simple story. Last year, I moved lettuce to a partner of mine in Abuja. And I went to the airport and I did the whole transaction in less than a couple of minutes. And before I got...
That was from Lagos?
From Lagos, down to Abuja. Now, before I got to my house, which is my house in Ojodu, the parcel, the lettuce, has already arrived at Abuja. In just less than 45 minutes or thereabouts. It has arrived fresh, arrived at Abuja. So we need to open up the food chain system in terms of transportation.
You're thinking of how to do that on a commercial basis?
To the commercial basis. We need to open up that space a lot because...
So from that little box, you're talking about several boxes?
Several boxes that could move easily, to homes, for distribution processes. And one of the things I want to regard in this conversation is that we need more private players that would come into the system and understand how this sector is being played so that smallholder farmers would not suffer to move their commodities from point A to point Z. So it could be easy.
Let me ask Tega. He looks like the big guy who has the big deep pocket. So I'm going to ask him, Tega, are you listening to Akin here? Is this what you're doing at Figure? What are you bringing to the table? Do you have the deep pocket to do this?
Yes. No, I don't have the deep pocket to do this. but
you go find the money. Okay, so how can we find the money? How can we find the right kind of investment that will help folks like yourself and Akin here?
I would give some experience because we try to, as a business, what we've been doing has been to provide monitoring for perishable agricultural commodity while they move from point A to point B and ensuring that losses are minimal, as well as providing data to ensure the insurance companies can also cover for losses when they happen. Now, the challenge with the aviation sector is that everything is priced in dollars, even if as a local player, if you're trying to move commodity by air freight, because this is something that we've looked at, greatly, and this is a challenge that I think exists. The air freight is good. The air companies are going to charge you, per kg in dollars, right? The cargo companies. And so when you look at also the exposure to the FX rates, because they buy, aviation fuel in USD. So they also need to generate that revenue in USD as well. Now, when you look at those dynamics, it becomes very prohibitive for the smallholder farmers. And this is where I think, the government comes to play, or large aggregators come to play. When you have large aggregators who are able to pull in, so there's economies of scale. They can build infrastructure, invest in infrastructure so that they can store cheaply. And then they can now leverage that, economies of scale as well for transportation through the aviation, sector. And one key area that we're also trying to address as a company is actually the provision of insurance, getting the insurance to play a role in the movement of perishable goods. Because right now, what tends to happen is you have your standard GIT, but a lot of losses that tend to happen in some of these sectors is due to exposures from high temperature conditions during transportation, or which leads to losses, right? So trying to get that in the insurance companies to play a role so that if losses also occur, that price is not passed on directly to the end consumer, pardon me, but the insurance company can help to cushion, some of these effects. I think that these are some of the ways that, my company is trying to help with this, but I also think that, these are ways that could realistically help also reduce some of the shocks felt by the end consumer.
Well, Tega and Akin, both of you are professionals in the agri sector, in the value chain, in the manner of speaking. So I'm going to ask Akin first. What would you like the new administration to do in terms of who's the next agri minister and all that? We've got about a minute or so.
Okay, this is the conversation that I've been keen on for several days. Now, the president needs to ensure that he puts in an industry player that understands the entire value chain to take administration.
Who's an industry player? A farmer?
Now, when I say
someone like Tega, yourself, I'm just asking.
Well, an industry player is someone that understands the entire value chain, that can close the dots and can close all the gaps together and say, look, this is how farmers, rural farmers, local farmers can begin to create wealth from the entire value chain. Because today, smallholder farmers, the producers, are still the one that are barely affected the most when everything happens. So we need to look for ways smaller farmers can create wealth across the entire ecosystem. And that's the most important thing. Leadership and an industry player that understand the value chain critically.
Tega, weighing on this as we begin to wrap up this conversation, what would you like Mr. President to do as far as this is concerned? Because I know smallholder farmers everywhere around the world, even across Africa, in Kenya, in other places, smallholder farmers are king.
Yeah, I think one thing that the president mentioned was the setup of commodity exchange boards to guarantee income of smallholder farmers. I think that's one key thing that I'm looking out for. And I think that whoever the next minister of agriculture should be able to drive this. What this would entail is those smallholder farmers in the last mile would be able to they'll be able to guarantee a marketplace for them, because they are the ones that are doing a lot of the productions, but they are some of the most impoverished people across, the country. So with the boards, you can have, standard pricing, you can do a bulk purchase, you can invest in storage and site storages at the right places for aggregation. And then, you can build the chain up from there, also improve on exports, and also build the necessary infrastructure, especially along the ports, because there's a lot of production that's happening for certain products in Nigeria that also needs to get out there so that we can also earn, from some of this export. So I think these are two major areas: infrastructure and as well as the boards for commodity exchange. I think those are two key areas that I think the government needs to focus on going forward.
Yeah, it's great having both of you here. Very insightful conversation. Thank you so much, Akin, Alabi from Corporate Farmers, and of course yourself, Oghenetega, Iortim, the CEO and founder at Figo. Thanks for putting the food on the table tonight. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.